name is Peter Robbins. I'm an investigative writer specializing in the subject of UFOs. I've been a speaker on 2 previous years for the conference part of the McMinnville UFO Festival, and am an unpaid volunteer for it. It's important to me for 3 reasons. Number one, it's a natural thing for people to want to blow off some steam around this subject for 2 reasons. One is it marks how deeply the subjects of UFOs and aliens have entered into popular culture, so people have an awful lot of fun with that. The parade is brilliant. It's just fun from start to finish without being in any way mean-spirited or mocking or derogatory toward the serious aspects of the subject. And it's a very serious subject. The conference part that I just took part in again almost covertly educates people to the seriousness. Year after year, the sponsoring groups bring in world-class speakers who are scholars, recognized authors, authorities in different aspects of UFO studies. The third reason is equally important, which is this brings needed economic health to a great American community. And after 10 years, the effects are palpable. People come from the Northwest, from all over the country to a lesser degree. They discover this beautiful part of Oregon. They may come here for the UFO Festival, but inevitably they're going to learn more about other cultural and natural tourist attractions, and they'll come back. By example, there's a small town in New Hampshire called Exeter, which, like McMinnville, is the site of a very important recognized UFO event in the mid-60s. This September, they'll be having their first UFO festival and conference, and it will be based in part on what myself and my colleague Kathleen Martin, who is a speaker here this weekend, will be bringing back to them in terms of having a first go at a mini kind of McMinnville.
I'm Kathleen Martin. I'm a scientific ufologist. My background is in social science and education. I have been a UFO researcher for the past 20 years. I served for 10 years on the Mutual UFO Network's Board of Directors as the Director of Field Investigator Training, and I'm also the niece of Betty and Barney Hill. I'm here this weekend for the McMinnville UFO Festival, and I spoke about the book that Stanton Friedman and I wrote together, captured the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience, and we lectured last night, and we also rode in the parade this afternoon. We'll be on a speakers panel later on this afternoon. And the reason I became interested in this topic is because when I was 13 years old, my aunt and uncle, Betty and Barney Hill, had a close encounter with a UFO in New Hampshire's White Mountains. I was seated in the room with my mother, Betty's sister, the following day when Betty called to tell her about her close encounter with a flying saucer.
My name is Stanton Friedman. I'm a reformed nuclear physicist. That's what I did in industry for 14 years. Got interested in UFOs, got heavily involved, and after the umpteenth government-sponsored advanced research and development program was canceled, I went full-time on UFOs, not traveling on them, but talking about them, researching them. The book Captured by Kathleen Martin and myself is one of 4 books that I have my name on. My approach is, as a scientist, to try to educate the public. I've spoken at over 600 colleges, 100 professional groups in all 50 states, 9 provinces, and 16 other countries. I'm a big mouth ufologist, if you will. Done lots of radio and television programs, and I take a very definite, strong stand. I'm not ambiguous about this. Some UFOs are intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. The subject represents a kind of cosmic Watergate, meaning some few people within major governments have known since at least July 1947, when 2 saucers crashed in New Mexico, that indeed some UFOs are alien spacecraft. Third, there are no good arguments against the first 2. And fourth, we're dealing with the biggest story of the millennium, visits to planet Earth by alien spacecraft.
I was seated in the room with my mother, Betty's sister, the following day when Betty called to tell her about her close encounter with a flying saucer. That was over Barney's protests. He thought that it would be better not to tell anyone at all. He thought that no good could come of it. But Betty thought she had some very exciting news, and she wanted to share it, and my mother was Betty's very close friend and sister. So within a couple of days, my family drove up to Betty and Barney's house, and I witnessed the evidence that something very strange had happened not the previous evening, but a couple of evenings before that, as Betty and Barney drove through New Hampshire's White Mountains. The watches that they were wearing that night had stopped working. They had been operating fine on the night that they drove home through the White Mountains. When they arrived home, they had stopped working. They wound them, thinking that they had just needed to be wound. But what happened is that they never worked again. Very perplexing. The tops of Barney's shoes were scraped. Very perplexing. He certainly had not done anything that could have caused that to happen to his shoes. He was a meticulous dresser. They were highly polished before that evening, and he was perplexed by what he found when he arrived home. Betty's dress was also torn. The dress was in fine shape when she put it on in the morning. All she did is sit in the car as a passenger during the day. She hadn't done anything that could possibly have caused a 2-inch tear in the fabric at the top of her zipper on the right side and a 1-inch tear at the top of her zipper and in the thick zipper fabric on the left side. Her dress was torn from waist to hemline. The hem was torn down. No obvious explanation for this. It was all very perplexing. She placed it in her closet, knowing that she'd have to repair it, but the next time she took it out, it was covered with a pink powdery substance. She hung it out on the clothesline, and the pink powder blew away, but she saw that her dress had permanently been damaged. It was stained pink. It had been blue, so it had now had a purpley pink effect, spotted in different areas. And she thought about throwing it away, but she decided to keep it because she thought it might hold a clue to what had happened on the night that they saw that UFO. They also realized that they returned home a couple of hours later than they had anticipated, even allowing for the 3 stops that they made to look at the UFO and for a period of slow driving through an area called Franconia Notch in the tourist section of the White Mountains in New Hampshire. There was also something that was very perplexing. Betty told my mother that she was concerned about radiation, what she and Barney might have been exposed to. And my mother told Betty that she would phone a neighbor of ours who was a physicist. Well, the physicist suggested for some reason, and I don't know why, that if Betty had a compass, she should take the compass out by the car and see how it would respond. Well, normally the compass needle is going to fluctuate when you place it near the battery, near the engine. But Betty started with the compass on the side of the vehicle. And as she moved it toward the back of the car, she noticed 12 to 18 perfectly shiny concentric circles on the trunk. It was as if someone had laid down a template and had sprayed lacquer over it. And when she placed the compass over these spots, the needle would spin and spin. And when she moved it away, it would drop down. She was very excited about this, and she finally convinced a reluctant Barney to go out and to look at those spots. And he also observed how the needle on the compass would spin and spin. I also saw those spots, and most of the members of my family saw those spots as well. We really don't have an explanation for why that happened, but that anomaly has been described in other UFO sightings, in landings, and also in crop circles. So it may be related to an electromagnetic anomaly.
I've had a great opportunity to do research on the subject, mostly self-financed, but been to 20 archives. And I bring to the subject a peculiar background. I hate to put it that way, but it's true. Not only working under security for 14 years, but I visited 20 different archives, document archives. I wrote classified documents myself. I worked on far-out propulsion systems, and one of the most common and wrong arguments against flying saucer reality is that you can't get here from there. Well, you can. Not on a bicycle, but with appropriate advanced nuclear and space systems, it's feasible to go to nearby stars with reasonable round-trip times, without violating any of the laws of physics. I'm not saying it would be cheap. That's a different question. Going to the moon wasn't cheap either. And there were people who said it couldn't be done no matter what money was spent. They were wrong. Okay, so I've been here in McMinnville twice before, actually. Way back close to 30 years ago, I was at Linfield College giving one of my college lectures, Flying Saucers Are Real. And then about 7 years ago, I was here for the McMinnville UFO Festival. Had a ball and enjoyed riding in the parade. I rode in the rumble seat of a 1932 Ford, and that was fun. So I enjoyed my visit here, and today was fun too. We were in the parade. Lots of people along the sidelines who seemed to enjoy waving at the people in the cars as much as we enjoyed waving at them. I've been to many UFO-related festivals. I'm the original civilian investigator of the Roswell incident, so I've been down there many times. The 50th anniversary celebration and the 60th and many other annual festivals down there. And I have no objection to parades, costume contests. Let the people in town have fun and let the merchants make money from all the people who come there. That's okay too. There's nothing wrong with that. Somebody complained to me about that. And they sell books and T-shirts and all this stuff. I pointed out I was in Fredericksburg, Virginia, years ago. Its main claim to fame is that 7,000 soldiers were killed in a battle during the Civil War. The fields reeked with blood. You can almost feel it when you're there and they tell you the story. Well, they sell T-shirts there and mugs and all that sort of thing because people want to go to these things. They want to bring back a souvenir. They want to feel they've been a small part of history. So flying saucers are an important part of history in the sense that not because I think all UFOs are alien spacecraft, because I think some are. And that's very important, that we're not alone. We're not the big shots in the neighborhood either.
Are you what they call the tinfoil hats?
We are.
Wow.
We are, and this is to prevent us from being abducted.
Ah.
You know, you have to be really careful that there aren't any pinholes. You have
ray
to,
resistant.
Yeah, exactly.
Ray
This is
resistant?
like the lightning rod, so.
So,
because we were here last year and everybody else was disappeared. Like by the end of the day, we were the only ones here, and it's because we had.
You think they didn't land into the old beer trough or something like that?
Well, you know, that could have been too. That could have been too. But yeah, this is definitely if you want to stick around and not be abducted today.
It wards off radiation.
It does.
We can't have that. The Van Allen belt, look out.
That's right.
Not only that, you can do away with TV and cable and just get your signal right in through here.
All
You can watch
right.
TV.
With all the signals going on these days.
That's how important it is,
He
you
knows.
know.
He's got the 2008 model.
Oh, is that the 2000 what?
That's
2008
the
model.
Ah,
So
These are
2009.
so you regressed a little bit
I
here.
regressed, yeah,
All
exactly. You know, it's the economy. You can't always afford a new one. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As I said, I worked under security. I worked on far-out advanced propulsion systems. Something else I bring to the subject, after 700 lectures, I once figured between that and the radio and television programs that I have answered maybe 50,000 questions. So I get a chance to educate the public. I enjoy that. I enjoy the response from people who say, thank you for doing what you're doing. They tell me they couldn't do it. I take a stand. I'm not an apologist ufologist. Why should I be? I was a high school debater, too, so I learned that I was pretty good on my feet and could handle the nasty, noisy negativists, as I call them. And so Kathy and I have known each other for a lot of years, and we decided just a few years ago that because I had been involved in the Betty and Barney Hill case, not being there at the time, but I met both Betty and Barney way back in 1968. Barney died in 69. And I've been at Betty's home. We had done television programs together. It's kind of funny. Universal Studios decided to do a movie about the case way back in 1975, starring James Earl Jones and Estelle Parsons. Barney was black, Betty was white, so there was a color aspect of this whole thing, if you will. And they called the Air Force to see if there were any scientists in the air who were knowledgeable about UFOs, and they gave them my name. I wound up as a consultant on that show, which I thought was extremely well done. I was very pleased about that. So I also was the first one to publish the data about the star map that Betty had observed on board the UFO. I happened to get called in by the head of one of the UFO groups to help a woman named Marjorie Fish, who was trying to build three-dimensional models to see if she could find a three-dimensional pattern that matched the two-dimensional pattern that Betty had drawn when Dr. Simon told her to draw, if she could remember it accurately, what she had seen on board the craft, this pattern of 16 stars or so connected with lines. And I got involved. I was the first to publish about the star map work. I've been very impressed by Marjorie's work and the fact that the base stars give us a whole new view about local conditions, if you will. We're accustomed to being 4.3 light years from the next star over, so we're kind of out in the boondocks, no next door neighbors. But there's two stars that turn out to be the base stars in this star map. Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 Reticuli are unique. They're only an eighth of a light year apart. That's 35 times closer to each other than the sun is to the next star over. They got next door neighbors, and they are 1 billion years older than the sun. So I expect that they know some things we don't know, that they would have early on tried to figure out how to get to the next star. We're isolated. They got a good reason for developing interstellar travel.
Betty and Barney had always intended for this story to remain confidential. They had made a confidential report to the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, and eventually they had seen Dr. Benjamin Simon for a period of 6 months where they were hypnotized separately. One waited in a soundproof room with very loud classical music playing while the other one was being hypnotized. And amnesia was imposed at the end of each session. So there could not be any way that there could be cross-contamination between Betty and Barney. However, after these sessions, about a year later, through a violation of confidentiality, their story was told in a Boston newspaper. This was very distressing. Betty was a social worker for the state of New Hampshire. Barney worked for the post office. They were very active in the civil rights movement. Barney had been appointed by the governor of New Hampshire to serve on the State Advisory Committee for the U.S. Civil Rights Commission and the Office of Economic Opportunity. He was the chairman of the board of directors for the Rockingham County Community Action Program and very active politically in the state. The three of us were actually invited guests at Lyndon Johnson's inauguration. So you can see that this is a story that Betty and Barney certainly did not want to have made public, but through a violation of confidentiality, it was made public. And this was very distressing to them initially. But John Fuller, who was an investigative journalist with a very good reputation, approached them and asked if they would at that point be interested in telling the true story of what happened, because the newspaper articles were inaccurate and misleading. So they and Dr. Simon cooperated with John Fuller in writing The Interrupted Journey, and then it was made public. It was a New York Times bestseller. Barney died in 1969, but later the movie UFO Incident, starring James Earl Jones and Estelle Parsons, made for television, aired. And Betty and Barney did appear on several television programs. Dr. Simon was renowned for his work with returning veterans during World War II. He was a psychiatrist and neurologist who set up the psychiatric unit at the Mason General Hospital on Long Island in New York. He worked with shell shock veterans, then known as battle fatigue as well, now known as post-traumatic stress disorder, with a very high rate of success. It was so high that the movie Let There Be Light was made about his work. And Betty and Barney saw him to help them to recover from traumatic amnesia. He knew nothing about UFOs. He did not believe that UFOs were real. He did believe that they had seen an object in the sky, but he saw them, particularly Barney, therapeutically, because he was having physical symptoms. He had bleeding ulcers that did not recede with traditional medical treatment. And that is what took Betty and Barney to Dr. Simon. And all of this seems to have morphed over the years into this event that we have today. For the past 20 years, I have been investigating the Betty and Barney Hill case. I have interviewed Betty, who died in 2004, for hours upon hours, acting as devil's advocate. I have reviewed all of the files. She left over 40 years of files full of letters from investigators and scientists who were interested in this case. In 1996, she gave me the hypnosis tapes, and I listened to them several times and transcribed them for comparative analysis vis-a-vis Betty's dream material, a series of dreams that she had about 10 days after her encounter. They lasted for 5 nights, and she wrote them down. I wanted to separate fantasy from reality and fact from fiction in this case, and that is what I spent all of these years doing, and became so interested and intrigued by what I found, all of this new information that had never been released before, that I decided to write this into a book. And in 2005, I asked Stanton Friedman to join me in this project, because he was the first to publish on the star map, on Marjorie Fish's identification of a star map that Betty drew under post-hypnotic suggestion by Dr. Simon. It was a map that she saw on board the craft, and that Dr. Simon suggested that she could draw only if she could recall it accurately.
I have found that the opinion polls, I mean, I've got a book, Flying Saucers in Science, and I give a whole bunch of opinion polls that show more people believe in flying saucers than don't. And the greater the education, the more likely to believe that some UFOs are alien spacecraft. So I find in over 700 lectures, and I come on very strong, I've only had 11 hecklers, and 2 of them were drunk, and the audience took care of the other 9. People are ready, willing, and able to listen to facts, data, solid information. I mean, people say, well, how do these things work? Don't you realize that Einstein says you can't go faster than the speed of light, blah, blah, blah. That's half an Einstein. That is, Einstein also said as you get close to the speed of light, time slows down for things moving that fast. How much depends on how close you get. And other people say, well, where are you going to get all the energy? Well, I point out, nuclear fusion was only discovered in 1938 as a source of energy for all the stars. That's the process that goes on. We figured it out in 1938 on a theoretical basis. We did something practical with it. Tells you a lot about us. In 1952, we exploded the first H-bomb. One device that released as much energy as exploding 10 million tons of TNT. 10 million tons. Big bombs during the war were 10-ton blockbusters. This is 10 million tons. And the Russians outdid the Americans a few years later, 57 million tons of explosive in one device. That's an awful lot of energy. And when I was working on fusion propulsion systems, I found that you could kick particles out the back end of the rocket that only have 10 million times as much energy per particle as they can get in a dumb old chemical rocket. So people who tell you that it can't be make about as much sense as saying man will never fly except with the help of a balloon. A great astronomer said that 2 months before the Wright brothers' first flight. So it's an exciting world we live in, and I'm proud to be part of it.
The end of the face painting line is right here behind the kid in the space astronaut hat. Can you hold that, please?
So it's been a fascinating ride over the years. Been interested for 52 years, been lecturing for 42 years. It's the biggest story of the millennium, visits to planet Earth by alien spacecraft. McMinnville should be proud of itself the way it put together these festivals over the years. They've had good speakers, great community interest. I frankly enjoy waving at the kids as we go by in the cars. So more power to them for bringing in not kooky people, but good people who have done a lot of research. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I appreciate the nice weather, too. It doesn't always happen up here, I've noticed in the past. So, vive la UFO, vive la McMinnville.
Mason, watch out. Stay to the left, Mason.
cemetery for them, the cardboard box, a place to lay their head. The miles of morning, take the ball with me, all they do.
think.